Welcome back. Another Challenge CupDate edition, reviewing round 1 of NWSL's return to play and previewing rounds 2 and 3. My name's Jason Longshore, joined by Jessica Charman. And Jess, we had a couple of really good matches over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic way to open the tournament. I think it was better than I expected. And honestly, the game started, or at least the first game started a little bit slow, but it was fantastic and the quality was there. And yes, there were moments where you could tell these players hadn't played for a while, but at the same time, it was thoroughly enjoyable. And the fact that the first game was on CBS regular television, it's just cracking. And I can't wait till they release, I don't know if they've released the stats yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to break the record for the most watched NWSL game.
Yeah, both games had, I think, a high entertainment value. Both games had some really strong play from some new faces. Both games were compelling all the way down to the final whistle. There's a lot of storylines on the field to talk about. There's storylines before the games as well. We talked about it a lot this morning on Soccer Down Here. I wanted to pick your brain about this because you're coming at this from a very different perspective with the U.S. national anthem being played before every sporting event. That's not what you're used to growing up, was it?
No, not at all. The national anthem, at least in England and most of Europe, I believe, is saved solely for international matchups. It's not something that's used during a domestic game. And for me, when I moved here and started playing collegiately, it was always very strange that it was played every single game. And even with double headers a lot of the time in college, you play it before the men's game, you play it before the women's game. So if you're watching both games, you listen to the national anthem twice. Now, I understand it's an American tradition, and I know it's very deeply rooted in sports. But when you have so many international players, and NWSL is full of a lot of international players, it can be a little bit odd. And potentially, as it's becoming somewhat controversial, such a huge talking point, perhaps it is something that can be removed from the game, and it wouldn't be weird for many players because, like I say, the US is really the only country in the world that I know of that plays it before every domestic sport. And as I joked on Twitter, but it's genuinely true, I've heard the US national anthem more times in my life than the God Save the Queen, and that's only since I've been here in 2013. It's just a different cultural experience, but it's one that potentially needs to be rethought. And I know they're talking about that. And did I read that MLS is opted out of the national anthem before the games?
Yeah, MLS will not be playing it before the games in Orlando with no fans in the stands. They haven't made a statement on beyond that when they're back in home venues and then potentially with fans in the stands later. There is some chatter as we record this afternoon that the NWSL could present things differently for the game starting tomorrow. We'll just have to wait and see. I haven't seen an official statement as of yet. It's awkward to begin with. I think it's even more awkward when there are no spectators. So all of that on top of the statements that so many players made. Technically, all the players made these statements. All the players came out wearing Black Lives Matter T-shirts. All the players knelt before the kickoff. There was a lot of good that happened in terms of making, big statements for the individual players themselves on Saturday. I think there was a bit of a distraction because of the way the anthem was handled by some players. I don't know how the Chicago Red Stars are going to deal with that going forward. They were the ones who took the brunt of it. Rory Dames did not have many players speak after the match, and they did not speak about that situation. We'll see what happens with them ahead of Wednesday, but I felt like it distracted all of us from a great match Saturday night, and I wanted to start there. Chicago fell behind 2-0 to the Rose Lavelle show. Rose was outstanding in the 65 minutes or so she played on Saturday night, but the Red Stars came back and made a game of it for some big saves late. What stood out to you about the Saturday night, Cap?
You have to start with Rose Lavelle as just the epitome of what NWSL can be. I mean, such an entertaining player, she plays with her heart on her sleeve, and it's fantastic. You look at her goal, and it shows everything that Lavelle's about. She's in the middle, great play, fantastic through ball. The through ball looks like she's created a certain goal, but does Lavelle stand there and admire her pass? No. What does she do? She makes a crashing run into the box to follow up after a great save from there. And like I messaged you, Jason, I think it's unforgivable of the defensive line that Lavelle is able to make the pass and still be the one getting onto the rebound. But at the same time, you have to praise your midfielder. That's what you want. You want someone that anticipates the save, that anticipates that she's going to get an opportunity, and that puts her body on the line and can finish. And what a finish it was. Top bins, no chance of any sort of save or block from the defensive line. But to me, that goal summed up so much about Lavelle as a player. And like I say, as a goalkeeper, I wouldn't have been happy. You make that sort of save from a one-on-one, you expect your defense to cover you. But all praise to Lavelle on that one. And we had talked about her in the preview show, and she didn't disappoint.
As good as she was, she could have had a couple more goals.
Yes.
She did leave a couple out there on the field, but a good 65 minutes for her. You get the goal in the 8th minute. Ashley Hatch was the one who had the original shot on that. She forced a very big mistake from the U.S. number 1, Alyssa Nair, to open the second half.
Jason, we cursed her. We were saying how she had won us over in the World Cup, and that one was just a lapse of concentration. I remember talking about how goalkeepers haven't had realistic game minutes, how they haven't had that match prep. And honestly, when I think back to my training days, a lot of the time when you did back passes, when you were playing 11v11 against yourselves, when you're scrimmaging, your forwards don't close in on you. They give you the time and the ball because they want to work on building out the back. They want to work on structure. They don't try and force the goalkeeper to make an error in practice. And maybe that's where Nair got that composure from. She was too chill. She took too long on the ball. And all praise to Hatch for closing in, for seeing that she was taking too long. But for me, Nair doesn't make that mistake if she's had plenty of game practice, if she's had those reps. But when you look back at it, if you're the US women's national team coach watching that, you are concerned, particularly with the performance of other goalkeepers that we saw in the tournament.
Yeah, it's something you got to talk about. And I thought you made a good point on the preview show about the challenges for goalkeepers here, because you haven't been tested in training in the same ways, but we didn't even get into a situation like this. And you're not at game speed, I think, to begin with, and then coming straight out of the halftime break, maybe you're even more kind of out of rhythm and maybe not realizing the speed of play, because Hatch closed Nair down very quickly, blocks the clearance, and then puts it in the goal to give Washington the 2-0 lead. A lot of teams might have folded up at that point, but Chicago did not. They pulled one back through Morgan Gautreau, the former Morgan Bryan, and a lot of people were caught by surprise. Really cool little surprise for her husband, Fabrice. Fabrice, many people don't know, played for the Atlanta Silverbacks. And Fabrice Gautreau played for the Silverbacks in 2015, part of the Chicago staff. And nice surprise for him, but a better surprise than the goal.
Yeah, the goal was brilliant. It showed her, again, the keyword anticipation. We talked about sharpness. Sometimes you expect when you haven't played for a while that you won't have that anticipation, that you're going to be a little bit slower. She capitalized off a weird deflection out the back, a stretched out leg that just knocked it into her path. The communication with the teammate was brilliant. I saw two players going for the ball. She managed to call that, no, this is mine. And the finish, perfect. Goalkeeper's outstretched hand. She might, I don't know. I feel like it almost looked to me like she wanted to do better. She got a hand on it. Maybe once you get that reach, her movement across the goal, she'd have wanted to put a bigger push on it. But finish into the bottom corner, and a great way to respond and keep them in the game.
Yeah, such a well-taken shot, low, driven from Gautreau. And Bledsoe might have wanted that one back. Aubrey Bledsoe made up for it as the night went on, though. Oh. You could have named her the woman of the match.
Oh, 100%. The quality of the save she made in important times was fantastic, and a huge variety of saves too. She had some point blank saves. She had some big saves, some above her head saves, and it was brilliant. I talked about being worried about goalkeeper performances, and bar Nair's error, it was brilliant from both of them. They both had solid games, and that comes from the quality of the shots. The forwards were producing shots. It was an entertaining game that, you know, if the goalkeepers don't have brilliant days, it's not a 2-1 match usually.
Yeah, it was a good one across the board. There were some players that stood out to me outside of the ones we expected, outside of Lavelle, outside of Ertz and some of the big names here. Who was a player that you maybe didn't know as much about coming in that grabbed your attention?
I would say I knew a lot about her, but I hadn't watched her play bar for the national team. And Nagasato, to me, looked good. She did exactly what I expected from her. She held the ball up nicely in the middle. I saw some great distributing passes, and I was impressed. You mentioned Julie Ertz, and I was thinking she was going to play more in the defensive role. I saw a lot of her going forward, but she just wasn't the Julie Ertz of the World Cup for me. On Saturday, I can expect more things from her. I saw a couple of balls from that midi that I think on a different day she connects better with the passes. There were some overhit balls, stuff like that. And again, I'm probably being overcritical here, but a player of her quality, you expect not to miss a beat. And I wasn't disappointed, but there were moments where I watched and I was just like, okay, you can tell they haven't played together for a while because they're not quite on that wavelength. But what that makes me excited for is 2-3 games down the line, once they've played these minutes together, once they get on the same page, once they're reading each other's runs, once they're knowing the pass they're looking for, it's going to be even better quality on the pitch.
Yeah, Nagasato's not a traditional number 9. I thought she got better as the night went on, but need to find her more. She's a player who I think you have to have on the ball more for Chicago to be the team that they can be. They went down the flanks a lot, and Keelia Watt had a lot of 1v1 opportunities, and she won a fair share of them. The final product wasn't producing quite enough, and I think that'll get better as the tournament goes on.
But she had the speed and her footwork and breaking into the box. I remember several runs where she forces the defenders to make a very difficult decision because they're having to put challenges in the 18-yard box that if you do not time it well, then you're going to give away a penalty. So I loved her endeavor and the way that she wasn't afraid to cut into the box and take people on.
See, that leads me to the shout that I wanted to give in this one is to the Washington Spirit backline in total. Mm-hmm. Bledsoe in goal, I thought she had the best goalkeeper performance of the 4 who played on Saturday. But the back line on the outside, Tegan McGrady, who left injured in the 64th minute, appears to be good to go for Wednesday. We'll see about that one when the lineups come out. Good performance at left back for her. I thought Paige Nielsen had maybe the best defensive play of the day, 1v1 with Watt. Holding her ground, great footwork, winning the tackle in the end. Tori Huster and Samantha Staub as well. Great backline performance. Only gave up 2 shots on goal. Felt like Bledsoe was maybe busier than that. The reason why the numbers don't really show it is the backline was really strong.
And that's what you want for a goalkeeper. Deep down, you like highlight reel saves, but if you can have a really non-busy game, then you're okay with it because it means your defense is stepping to the ball well. And that's what I really feel like the Spirit had a mature performance. We mentioned how young they are, but they didn't play like a young team. They played like an organized team that communicated well. And that just shows how much they have to grow into. They're young, but they're playing like this now. Imagine, again, 3-4 games into it, and they're not going to hit hot yet. They want to hit hot when it comes to the knockout stages.
I'm not going to lie. I feel pretty good about my pick of the Washington Spirit making the final after this one.
Yeah, I agree with you. If I had a time-traveling machine, I might go back and change my pick because they were everything you said they would be, Jason. They were young and lively and exciting. Just hopefully they can keep their head in the game, stay focused, and we'll see how they do next game.
Yeah, I want to see how they grow into this tournament. I want to see how the Portland Thorns grow into this tournament as well. They were really impressive in a losing effort in the early game on Saturday. North Carolina came out like we expected. All energy. The unleashed comment that Paul Riley had was accurate. First 15, maybe 20 minutes was all North Carolina. Portland regained their footing, and they had a lot of the play for the rest of the first half. Second half could have went either way. Thorns looked really good without Tobin Heath.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the Thorns. We were messaging throughout the game, and they were smart. They soaked up the pressure. For them to have been the biggest thing for me watching those first 20 minutes of madness was don't concede. Like, you didn't want the Thorns to concede, because if you give the Courage a goal, they're already on this unleashed mentality. They're playing with fire, let alone if you concede and give them that confidence. So the longer Portland held their line, the longer they went without conceding, you could tell the Courage were getting a little bit frustrated. They were getting a little bit concerned. And that allowed Portland to counter on numerous occasions. I remember big chances for both sides. And, you know, they hung in there. They played their hearts out. And to concede so late on, that's got to be really frustrating. And I hope they take it. There's two ways they can respond to that. They can be completely disheartened and upset and let it feel like, damn, we were the better team, we were hard done by. Or you take it and you let it motivate you that we're not going to work that hard again to come out with nothing with 1 minute remaining in a match.
Let's talk about the goalkeeper for Portland. NWSL debut for Bella Bixby. What'd you think?
Well, I wasn't expecting her to play. I thought they were going to play Ekstrom based on the rosters. You know, I think she did really well for her first game. There was some criticism on her, but she looked sharp. She made some good saves. She, like I say, she performed. She held the shutout for a long time. The two goals, you know, again, we're going to keep going back there, but they haven't had the same training. They haven't had those 50-50 balls. And the cross for the goal was brilliant. It was one of those crosses that's at a good height for the goalkeeper, so they think they're going to come, but it's drilled with enough power that all it takes is a tiny little deflection from Dabina to find the back of the net. And Dabina was there quicker. And I think the goalkeeper, if she had had longer to train, if she's had more reps, I think maybe she gets hands on that one next time. And then the second goal, if I remember correctly, we were talking about this as well, good footwork across the goal, like very good, quick footwork. Many goalkeepers, particularly smaller goalkeepers, she's 6 foot, wouldn't have even got there to get hands on it. But once she gets 2 hands on it, she's got to push it away from net. Instead, she pushes it up into her net. And you always tell with goalkeepers when they zoom in on them, yeah, you're always upset if you've conceded a goal. But when they zoom in on your reaction and you can see that emotion, that sheer like frustration, you know they think they could have done better. And I think with Bixley, that was the same for both goals. But other than that, I mean, she definitely made up for those 2 goals with some big saves throughout the match.
Yeah, I thought Bixby played well. I think she took too much of the criticism. The back line for Portland, to me, wasn't strong enough. I think they left her out to dry way too much. I did like the midfield and the attack for the Thorns. I really loved the game that Christine Sinclair had, because what North Carolina will do to you with that 4-2-2-2 is they'll just clog things in the middle, and it's tough to get out. Sinclair was listed as the number 9. She played a lot more like a number 10, leaving Everett and Lucy up top. And it was Sinclair dropping in with Lindsay Horan and Rocky Rodriguez that was allowing Portland to get out. I think when they played their best, it was typically because of those 3 finding a way through North Carolina's pressure.
Yeah, and I was impressed with, she doesn't play like an older player. The way she was running and driving with the ball at her feet sometimes, you're looking at her and you're like, wow, you are an incredible athlete. And if I can have that athleticism at 37, I think she is, something like that. It's incredible that she still has that first touch that sets her up to drive. So you're right. She didn't play how I've been used to seeing her play, but she did a really good job. And Horan, like she's a trip to watch, and I'm glad that she had a little bit of a head injury at one point. I was worried about that, but she got up and she kept playing, and they need her. She's an important player too.
So on the North Carolina side, Lynn Williams was a player that a lot of people were critical of throughout the day, but she had the winning goal.
Yeah, and that's the joy of being a striker, though. It's all forgiven usually. A goalkeeper makes a mistake, and no matter how many saves, you still remember the mistake with Williams. Look, she even, I think they had said pre-game that they were concerned about her finishing, and maybe that got into her head a little bit. If you hear your coach saying that she's not hitting her perfect form in front of goal yet, that puts a lot of pressure on your shoulders. She was getting into good positions. She just didn't have the end product through most of the game, was a little bit selfish at times. And again, maybe that's the desperation to get a goal, but her goal, she timed her run perfectly, got a good header on it, and well deserved. And if you keep taking your chances, you're bound to get one. And maybe that was the finish she needed to now give her that composure and confidence if she's given more chances next game.
See, you will defend the goalkeepers. I'm going to come on and defend the striker here. So
help you. It's only balance. It's only fair.
Of course. That situation, everybody went nuts on that one. Williams and Kristen Hamilton on the break. I believe it was Becky Sauerbrunn who was defending. And I thought Sauerbrunn did enough when Williams got her head up and looked for Hamilton. Sauerbrunn dropped off and tried to fill the passing lane. Maybe didn't nail it exactly, but it was enough to get in Williams' head. And then once she made the decision to pull it back, she was going to try to go to goal the whole way. Bad shot. Not good at all. But I think you have to give the defender a little bit of credit there. Where I'll give Williams a ton of credit is a lot of strikers in any league will have that happen and then not want the ball, shy away from the game.
Yes.
And she did not. She had more chances as the game went on, and she connected on ultimately the goal in the 94th minute to win it.
And that's when that was the chance that probably had the most pressure on it. You're 94 minutes into a game. You've got an open header, per se, on goal. That's the one that, as that ball's coming to her, if she doesn't have the right mentality, if she psychs herself out, that one you get under it and you head it over, or you cushion it too much and the goalkeeper saves it. So she was there when she needed to be, and she got her reward and is the hero and the reason why they're coming away with 3 points. So I'm happy for her. It was a fun way to end the game, but it seemed a little hard on Portland for me.
Yeah, it did. Portland could have got out of there with a point. I think North Carolina was the better team, and I think they are what we thought they would be. Maybe not quite as sharp, maybe not quite as fit, but they played what we expected them to do. I thought a couple players who jumped out to me in the match that had good performances outside of the usual suspects. Crystal Dunn, I love seeing in an attacking role. I would love to see her play more as a number 10 or an attacking player for the U.S. women's national team. Samantha Mewis with the game-winning assist, outstanding. But the two players for North Carolina that stood out to me were the defender, Addison Merrick, as a rookie playing in that right back role. I thought she was really good for the 57 minutes she played. And then the assist on the first goal, Haley Mace. It was almost her first touch coming on, taking a touch out wide, putting a cross in that was in the perfect spot to where Bixby couldn't come to it, and driven enough to where all Dabinia had to do was just redirect.
Yeah, you cannot praise that sort of service enough. Like I say, it's the nightmare service for any goalkeeper because it's right on the edge of the six. You think you're taught forever that anything in the six is yours, so you psych yourself out, and she made it easy for Davina and her pace. Like, she's a quick player that's going to want to get behind you. She took the perfect touch to set herself up. She gave herself time and she made it look easy, but that quality of a cross isn't easy. And I would have said she was the player I was extremely impressed by. And as you mentioned, for that to be your first touches, that's quality. That's being able to come in and adjust to the speed of the game right away. And that's not an easy skill to have.
That's a player that Paul Riley went out and really prioritized bringing in this season and is very high on, and you see the quality there. Let's talk about the Portland goal real quick. Great header, I thought, from Lindsay Horan to get it into a spot that really, I think, caught Stephanie LeBay by surprise. What do you think of the way she handled that header?
Look, I think that a goalkeeper of her quality should be tipping that one over the crossbar. She tips it onto the bottom of the crossbar, then it hits the back of her shirt, and then it's bobbling around. And when I watched it back, she was trying to smother it once it was bouncing along the line, but it's her own defender that gets in the way. And so that lack of communication there. And I think she just needs to get a bigger fist and push that one over the crossbar. Her positioning, she's caught off a little guard. But like you say, the actual first header has a lot of power on. So maybe I'm being a little bit harsh. But I feel like a goalkeeper of that quality, particularly, she's not a small goalkeeper, should be able to parry that one over the crossbar. And then I feel like we've seen braver goalkeeping from all the goalkeepers that once it was bobbling on the line, if you're making that mistake, your instinct needs to be to throw yourself on the ball and smother it instead of sort of no you go, no I go mentality that it looked like she had with her defender.
Yeah, it looked like the header maybe caught her by surprise on how much Horan got on it because she was kind of falling down trying to connect with that cross. Great work from Horan. Great work from the substitute Simone Charley to stay with it as well in all the chaos, keep her head and equalize.
And not foul, because it can be difficult in that environment to be called for a foul. The ref is potentially looking to bail out the goalkeeper. It's something we're pretty blessed with is the overprotection. And she did well to get there, not pull anyone back, not be called for pushing. And like you say, anticipation and following up and expecting a bobble, expecting something to happen, and a well-deserved goal, and it showed a lot of fight.
So both 2-1 matches on the weekend, I thought both were really entertaining. Most of the folks who watched and were commenting on Twitter and going back and forth were into it. I thought a lot of people were watching, which was very cool to see. A lot of people were kind of engaged in the conversation. I hope that's the case for these next two games during the week. Tomorrow, Houston-Utah Royals, that's the early game. OL Reign and Sky Blue is the late game. Let's talk about the first one, 12:30 Eastern Time. You can watch on CBS All Access. Houston-Utah Royals. Utah, the home team here, but you're not going to have the home crowd. They're missing Kristen Press. What are you looking for out of this one?
It's a tough one. It's if you've watched those first two games, you've got big expectations. You've seen the quality of those four teams, and you've got a lot to live up to. So I'm just hoping for more of the same in terms of the work ethic, more of the same in terms of the quality. And we've got two very different teams. And as you mentioned, Jason, early in the preview, Houston's an aging team, and that may go against them in these conditions. And Utah is hot as the devil's armpit, according to one of my colleagues that actually is from Utah. It's a dry heat. It's a different type of heat, and there's all sorts of forest fires going on at the moment. So apparently that's affecting the visual, and maybe that's where Utah does have the advantage to an extent, because they may not have the home crowd, but they're used to these conditions. They're used to this dry heat and this different environment in the mountains. So I'll be interested to see that battle.
Amy Rodriguez, one of my favorite players in the league. Vera Boquette for Utah, both creative, both super technical and just unpredictable. I do want to see if Utah's rookie out of NC State, Ziara King, gets the opportunity in place of Kristen Press. There's been a lot of hype on King and a lot of expectations. Can she step in? Luckily, she's got some veterans around her that can maybe make it a little bit easier and try to give her some confidence in the game. I mean, You see it all the time when you have a young player step in, a young player that can play at this level and can be impactful at this level. Sometimes it's the veterans who try to get them the right early touches to bring them into the game.
Yeah, and I hope she gets that start because, yes, we mentioned a player getting off the bench and having an incredible run into the match, but it's not always easy to come off the bench, particularly in a forward-thinking position. If you're not going to see the ball very often, it can be easier to nurture someone in if they start the match because everyone's at the same pace. Everyone's at the same sort of level early on. Everyone's getting their first touches in. So hopefully she'll get a start and she'll be able to show what she's made of. But it's about having those experienced players around you that can kind of think before they play you the ball. They're not going to play you a buzzing pass into your feet, a stinging pass early on, a skills check sort of pass. They're going to think about the right time to get you involved in the game to make sure you're building that confidence and keeping your head high, because the last thing you want is to force a player into making an error early on in their debut.
I don't know if we really know what to expect out of the Houston Dash just yet. There's a lot of names who have left the club. Kealia Watt now in Chicago, Sofia Huerta over to OL Reign. We don't really know exactly what they look like yet. Rachel Daly, a player from England's national team, is a focal point up top, but she's going to need some help. One player that we've talked about that we want to see her performance in this one, maybe in light of what we saw on the weekend, is goalkeeper Jane Campbell.
Yeah, 100%. She needs a big game. And she's watched, it's not fun watching goalkeepers mess up. She's seen heroes and she's seen zeros in the previous game. So she'll be wanting to stay focused. And, I hate to say it, but she's been on the fringes of the women's national team, and she's seen a couple of shaky moments from there. Maybe she's thinking, if I can perform well during this tournament, if I can have a solid game, keep a shutout, do everything right, then that might give me a little bit of a push forward in the favorite position. And like you say, Daly, a great striker that's been at Dash for a while, has plenty of goals under her belt, but you can't create your own chances. She can only do so much. So she's going to need some service to make sure she gets those opportunities.
The nightcap tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Kickoff will be just after that. CBS All Access for OL Reign and Sky Blue. Both teams missing the familiar faces in this one. OL Reign, no Megan Rapinoe. Sky Blue, no Carly Lloyd. No Mallory Pugh. What are you expecting in this one?
A battle, an absolute battle. As we know, Sky Blue really the underdog. They weren't great last season, got a new coach in, working with a different mentality and kind of changing the setup over there. She's got a lot of respect from the players, though, from what I've seen and heard. The boss is definitely respected. And then with OL Reign, you're looking at in a similar position, a lot of change going on over there with the purchase and gaining players on loan, but still shifting its identity, new coach as well. So two teams that potentially don't know exactly who they plan on being, and neither team can really have scouted each other properly either, both missing their big names. So maybe that one kind of deadlocks it as they come in as a really even, unpredictable matchup.
On the Sky Blue side, two players that I think have maybe a chip on their shoulder in this one are McCall Zerboni and Midge Purse. Two players who've been around the national team picture. Vlatko Andonovski is there. He's watching these games. He's, I think, got a foot in the bubble and a foot outside the bubble. He's staying away from everybody, but he is consuming all of this, and he's looking at what his next pool is going to be for the U.S. women's national team. Zerboni a little bit older, but I think she brings a character and a fight to the midfield that is needed at times, and Purse is a player who just hasn't really had the same opportunity. One other player, not a U.S. international, that you were really high on coming into this because she's had a lot of work over the years, is Kaylin Sheridan, the goalkeeper.
Yeah, 100%. She's had a lot of practice. When you play we talked about when you play for one of the weakest defenses, you're going to get the most reps in, and she'll be prepared for the game. She'll be ready to go. She's broken plenty of records. She's only 24 years old. She's a Canadian with a huge future, and it's going to be, again, a tough challenge for a goalkeeper. You're coming in, you haven't had as much practice, but I expect big things. But I'll be honest, I'm hoping that the Sky Blue defense this year is a little bit more organized. Freya Coombe, their coach, again, is a very defensive-minded coach. She was very particular in our training sessions on organization, on leadership out of the back. She wanted a goalkeeper that communicated all the time, that wasn't afraid to use their feet. And she was a stickler for set play defending. So if they concede from any set plays, I know that will drive Coach Coombe absolutely insane.
Zerboni's not in the back, but in a holding midfield role. It sounds like she's the perfect kind of player for Freya Coombe and that kind of mentality. She's a leader, and maybe that's something that this team hasn't had enough of. Carly Lloyd's definitely a leader, but without her in this group, in this tournament, Zerboni becomes a really important element to what's got to be.
She has to step up and lead. And if you have a team that has a somewhat losing mentality, that's used to losing, they need someone in that middle that, if things don't go to plan, if you go a goal down 20 minutes in, that you've got someone that's going to bring your players back together and lead from the midfield and let them know, you know what, we're still in this. You can't let your head drop. And that's really important for a team to have.
On the OL Reign side, Sofia Huerta moves over from Houston, a player I think has deserved more of an opportunity with the U.S. women's national team. We'll see how she goes into this tournament, and maybe she's got that chip on her shoulder as well. Jess Fishlock from Wales is a big personality with OL Reign. Alana Cook's on loan from PSG, so I would expect that she'd play a good bit, and she's another one who has just started to edge into the national team picture. There's a lot of players in this on the nightcap match that have a lot to prove to their national team managers.
Yeah, and when you know the managers are watching, when you know they're paying attention to this, it goes two ways. You've got to play like you know they're there to an extent because you want to show you care, you want to put a bit of pressure on yourself, but at the same time, you can't let it psych you out. It should be no different to any other game. You should be performing to the best level that you can, and you know what? If you have a mess up, if you don't take a good touch, you can't let that then get into your head that, oh no, I've damaged my chances. You've got to really recover and play, your heart out, because coaches are looking, and this is a time of big change. You see with international teams a lot, when you have a change of manager, no spot is guaranteed. No roster spot is your spot. You have to prove to everyone that you deserve that place. So it's an exciting time for all the women's teams that are playing.
We won't have a cup date after Tuesday's games before Wednesday's game, so we'll just quickly look at the schedule for Wednesday. The two teams that lost on Saturday, Portland and Chicago, that's your early game at 12:30. The nightcap is going to be worth staying up for. Washington and North Carolina at 10 o'clock on CBS All Access on Wednesday. Who do you think in that early game has more to prove, Portland or Chicago?
I think you go with Chicago, only because they were in the championship game in 2019. They were the number 2. They were probably everyone's second pick. I think with Portland, they already proved themselves with hanging with North Carolina Courage so well. I think it's Chicago who feels like they were hardest done by, or that they dropped points in their first match, so they won't want to drop another set of 3 points.
And in that nightcap, is it a game that Washington has to show that they can play on the same level with North Carolina? Is it to that point, or is it maybe just a little bit of an exploration for them as to what it is to be at that level?
I think it's an exploration, because you know what? They've set themselves up with the first win. There's still another 2 group games. Then you're going into the knockout rounds, and you're most likely going to face the Courage again. So I think they go out, they play the way that they play, and they learn from it. And if it doesn't go well, then you take those lessons from it. That's what's kind of nice about the setup of this tournament. With Orlando dropping out, every team is going to get through into the knockout round. So you can kind of use these preliminaries in a little bit of exploring once you know that you're going to get a decent seed. So I think Washington will go into it wanting to win, no doubt about that. But they can also use it as a learning experience. But you know what? I think they'll hang. I think they'll do okay. I think that their energy and their sharpness is going to be a challenge for the Courage. I think it'll be a close game.
See, my gut feeling is Paul Riley goes into this and says, you know what? This is a team that we might be seeing in the final or in a semifinal down the road. This is where we're going to play a lot of different players in this one.
To not give them that advantage.
I wonder if that's it.
He'll frame it as resting players, but that's not a bad move as a coach. Because if you show all your cards early on, then you help a team like Washington prepare. And like you say, Jason, you've got them as your pick for the finals. So maybe Riley isn't too crazy if he does that.
I'll be curious to see how they approach it. I'm looking forward to that one. I'm looking forward to the nightcap tomorrow night. It's going to be a good one, too. All four of these look like they're going to be fun matches. We'll be back to talk about them on Friday. There are games on Saturday and Sunday next weekend. We'll have a recap of this set of doubleheaders, and we'll have a preview of the weekend action on Friday. Give us one player in these next 2 days of action that you have to make sure you're watching.
Oh, we've already talked about her, but I'm going to go with the goalkeeper. I'm going to go with Kaylin Sheridan just because I think she's going to have a worldie. I think she's going to have a worldie. I think she'll be busy, but I think she's in a different role this season. I think she is a goalkeeper that's been so used to having to get beaten and bashed and be trying to keep the score down. I think this season, instead of keeping the score down, she's the goalkeeper that's keeping your team in with a chance at the points, if that makes the difference makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I'm going to go with the rookie from Utah, Ziara King. I want to see her get this opportunity around some veteran attackers, see what she can bring to the table. I want to see new blood with the U.S. women's national team. Ziara King's one of those players that we could see really grow from this tournament. I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait to see all of it over the next couple of days. Tweet at us while you're watching. Tweet at us after you watch. Let us know what you think of these matches. Let us know what you think of the cup dates. And if you have questions for the next edition, send them our way. We'll work them into the show. At Jess Talks Footy with an IE, not a Y, because I don't want to be a plonker. And at Longshoe or at Soccer Down Here. Jess, thanks, and looking forward to a couple more great days of action.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Keep hanging with the NWSL.